Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to go through some notes on Chapter 4 to hopefully help you review the material and remember some of the stuff you may have forgotten since we worked on this chapter. This will really help you get ready for the types of questions that you're going to see on your final. So again, this is going to be focused on Chapter 4 and I'll have another video for Chapter 5. So in Chapter 4, we really focused on the coordinate plane and then on graphing lines. So the first thing I want to talk about is just basics of the coordinate plane. So here's some things you need to be able to do. The first thing is you need to be able to label the following on the coordinate plane. So we need to know which is the x and which is the y. So remember, our x-axis is here and our y-axis is here. Okay, we need to know where the origin, again, that's where the x and y axes intersect. And also good to know is the ordered pair of the origin, which is going to be 0, 0. While we're talking about an ordered pair, I'm going to make a note. Remember, in our ordered pair, the x always comes first and then the y. And that'll come up when you're plotting points and then again later when we're graphing as well. The last thing for the ordered pairs, the coordinate plane is knowing what the quadrants are. So remember, we start up here, and then we go 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you'll have some questions where you need to know which quadrant is which. So that's some basics of the coordinate plane. Talking about ordered pairs, for example, if I had the ordered pair, let's say 4, -5, remember the first ordered pair, the first coordinate in that ordered pair, always tells us right or left. So since this is positive, I start at the origin and go 4 to the right. And then that negative tells me to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that point would be down here. So again, the second one tells us up or down. Okay, after we talked about the coordinate plane, we talked about scatter plots, and that was just graphs, remember, where we were plotting sets of data. A big thing in that section was talking about correlation, right? How the data is related. So what we need to know here is if I have a positive correlation, here's my x and y, my data might look something like this. So as the value of x goes up, the value of y goes up as well. Negative is going to be just the opposite. Now, as the value of x gets bigger, we'll see our y's getting smaller, so we have that downhill effect. And then the last thing we might see is no correlation, right, which is where our data truly is scattered all over and we can't really tell any relationship between those data sets. Okay, so for the rest of this, we're going to focus on graphing, and we're going to talk about graphing by a few different methods. Okay, the first one is graphing by intercepts. And really, whenever we're talking about intercepts, this is really where you want to be thinking about that cover-up method. And I'm going to talk about that in a second here. But when we're talking about intercepts, that's what we're talking about, our cover-up method. So as a review, the x-intercept is the point where a line crosses the x-axis. Makes sense? So if we want to find the x-intercept of an equation, we cover up the y and solve for x. Now notice, whenever we're graphing by intercepts, our equation is going to be in standard form, right? It means the x and the y are on the same side of the equal sign. So if I want to find the x-intercept, I cover up the 4y. And I notice all I have left is 2x is equal to 8. If I were to solve that, I'm going to divide by 2, and I get x equals 4. Now, if I'm looking to plot that on the graph, remember this is an intercept, it's not an ordered pair. So I'm going to go to the x-axis, I'm going to find where x is a positive 4, which is right here, and I'm going to make a dot on my graph. Okay, now I want to find the y-intercept, again, the point where the line crosses the y-axis. Now I'm going to do the opposite. To find the y-intercept, I'm going to cover up the x. Now in this case, I have to be careful here. When I cover up that 2x, I notice that what I have left is a minus 4y. So negative 4y equals 8. I'm going to divide by a -4. And so y is -2. So now to plot that, I know I'm going to plot along the y-axis. Since y is -2, I go down here and I make my point. So each of these intercepts gives me a point on my graph, and then I'm just going to connect them with a straight line. Okay, so that's graphing by intercepts. So on the final, some questions may just ask you to either find the x or the y intercept, and some may actually ask you to match to a graph. All right, moving on. The next thing in this chapter, we talked about slope. Now, there's two things we have to remember here. One is the slope formula. That's our m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Right? And we use this if we're given 2 points on a line. Okay, we also can think of slope as rise over run. And we use this if we're given a graph. Okay, so we have two methods of finding slope, and then there's 4 cases for what our slope can look like. If our line is going uphill, we say that's a positive slope. And remember, when we're determining slope, we always think of starting to the far left. So if my person's down here and starts walking, they're going to walk uphill. We have a negative slope. Again, I go to the far left. Well, if this person starts walking, they're going downhill. That's my negative slope. Okay, then I have 0 slope. If you think of Slope Dude, said that was 0 fun. And then last but not least, we have an undefined slope. Finding slope, particularly if you have a graph, it's going to be really important to pay attention to whether your line is going uphill and should be positive or whether it's going downhill and should be negative. So remember to check those signs. All right, so the next thing we did was we learned how to graph using slope-intercept form. And hopefully we all remember that slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Our m represents the slope, and b represents the y-intercept. Okay, so to graph an equation in slope-intercept form, first thing we're going to do is plot the y-intercept. Then, starting at the y-intercept, we use the slope, or really rise over run, to locate a second point, and then we're going to connect those points with a straight line. So for example, if I had this equation here, and I was asked to find or to graph y equals -2/3 x plus 4, first thing I would pick out my m, which I know is -2/3, because the m goes with the x. My b is a +4, and now I'm going to follow my steps. So the first step said to plot the y-intercept. Well, here I have a +4, so I'm going to go along the y-axis, and I'm going to plot a point at +4. Now, starting at that y-intercept, I'm going to use the slope, or rise over run. Right? This is just my rise over run. I'm going to use that to find another point. So I'm going to start here. Now, since my slope is negative, my rise is going to be negative. So I'm going to go down 2, and then to the right 3. So now I've got 2 points, and I can connect those with a straight line. Okay, now our test is going to be multiple choice, so you won't actually be graphing a line like this. What you would be asked to do is give an equation, find the correct graph. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a test-taking strategy to help you out here. So this is an example of a question you might see on the final. So the example question could say, which of the following is the correct graph of the equation y equals negative 3x plus 4? So here's kind of my hints for how to approach this problem. If I were looking at this problem, first I would find the correct y-intercept, and I would eliminate any graphs that don't match. So for example, I know my y-intercept is positive 4. So I'm going to find out if there's any graphs that don't intersect the y-axis at positive 4. So if I look here, well, this line does cross y at positive 4, so that's okay. B, I notice, does not cross at positive 4. It crosses at negative 4, so B can't be the answer. And then C, let's see, it looks like it does cross, so C is still a possible answer. But at least now I've reduced my choices, so I have a better chance of getting the right answer. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to determine the sign of the slope. So really I'm going to ask myself, should my line be going uphill or downhill? And then I'm going to find the graph that matches. So in our case here, our m is negative 3. Since my slope is negative, my line better be going downhill. Well, if I look at part A, or answer A, that line's going uphill. So that line can't be the answer. So that means C must be my solution, and that line is going downhill, so it matches. So I didn't actually have to graph, I just had to kind of reason through what that graph should look like. So that might help you out on the test if you use that kind of approach. All right, the last thing then for this chapter was talking about horizontal and vertical lines. So first, what they look like. Horizontal lines we know look like this, and vertical lines are going to go up and down like this. Now, I'm going to graph. Let's look at horizontal lines. I'm just going to put one right here. It looks like it does above. And what you notice about horizontal lines is those are actually going to cross the y-axis. So their equation is y equals, and in this case, it crosses at 3, so my equation is y equals 3. Remember, it's always going to be y equals a number. Okay, vertical lines, if I just sketch one in here, let's say it's going up and down, that vertical line crosses the x-axis. So its equation is going to be x equals, and again, in this case, it's negative 3, so I'm going to have x equals negative 3. So in general, it's going to be x equals a number. Okay, now looking at the slope, we've already talked about slope, so hopefully by now we recognize this slope for a horizontal line, is 0. For a vertical line, it's undefined. And if you remember, right, we had our little kind of memory device. We said horizontal lines, we used HOI. Horizontal, they have 0 slope, and their equation is y equals. And then for vertical lines, we said VUX. Vertical lines have an undefined slope, and their equation is x equals. So those were the main concepts that we covered in Chapter 4. You'll notice if you flip past these review notes, you have some practice multiple choice. It would be to your benefit to go through those multiple choice questions, try them on your own, and then I have included the answers as well so that you can check. Good luck studying.